Hello family, welcome to Stories by Tochi. We bring you interesting folk tales. Please subscribe and drop a like for us. This generosity would go a long way for us. Also share to family and friends. And please turn on post notification to stay tuned for more. Thank you as you do so. Now let's get into the story. The city of Enugu had a strange silence on the morning of the burial. The air hung thick with the scent of wet dust, palm fronds, and burnt candle wax, and people moved as though time itself had slowed to mourn with them. The street leading to the Okafor family house was a river of black clothes and hushed conversations. Inside, Ma stood beside her mother, her face blank yet trembling underneath, like glass about to crack. She had not cried the way others did. She carried her grief differently, quietly, tightly, as if afraid that letting it out would drown her. Their father's coffin sat in the center of the sitting room, surrounded by old friends and neighbors murmuring prayers. Each voice sounded distant, like echoes trapped inside a well. The rain that had fallen earlier clung to the air, and through the open window, Ma could see a small bird perched on the power line, shaking its feathers restlessly, as if feeling the same unease that gnawed inside her chest. Death had come and gone, yet it left a shadow that refused to leave. The funeral ended, and one by one, guests departed, leaving behind silence thick enough to hear the hum of electricity from the nearby transformer. Mama Ifeoma sat in her husband's armchair, staring at nothing. Ma knelt by her side, holding her mother's palm, cold, still, almost weightless. The only thing that broke their trance was the knock on the door, a hesitant sound that seemed to bring the past along with it. When Ma opened the door, the postman stood there, rein on his cap, holding a letter. He said it had arrived days before the burial, addressed to Mrs. Ifeoma Okafor and family. His voice was gentle, unaware that the piece of paper he carried would scatter the fragile calm that grief had left behind. Ma took the letter and stared at the handwriting, feminine, slanted, and unfamiliar. The paper trembled in her hands. Her mother's eyes lifted slowly, and something like dread passed across her face, as though she already knew that whatever truth slept inside that envelope would wake something best left forgotten. It took hours before they opened it. Evening had draped itself over Enugu, the city glowing with restless lights, and the neighborhood children's laughter echoed faintly from somewhere far away. The living room smelled faintly of camphor and old sorrow. Mama Ifeoma sat quietly, her eyes on the letter. Ma stood by the curtain, twisting its edge in her fingers, unwilling to push. Finally, Mama tore the envelope and read, her lips moving slowly. Her hands trembled slightly, and the color drained from her face. When she spoke, her voice was faint but sharp enough to make Ma's stomach tighten. "Your father, he had another child," she said, her tone hollow, as though the words were too heavy to carry. The air in the room froze. Ma stared, uncomprehending at first, until her mind caught up. The words did not sound real. They hung between them like smoke that wouldn't disappear. Mama read on. The letter was from a woman in Nsukka, claiming she was once close to Mr. Okafor, and that they had a daughter, 17, named Adiz. The woman had died recently, and before her death, she'd written to inform the family, begging that the girl not be left without kin. Ma wanted to laugh, to deny it, to say it was a mistake, but her father's memory stood before her like a ghost that would not let her speak. The man she thought she knew, calm, righteous, predictable, suddenly seemed full of doors she had never opened. "So what happens now?" Ma asked. Her voice cracked. Mama Ifeoma did not answer immediately. She leaned back, her eyes lost in the ceiling, and whispered, "We bring her here." The decision hung heavy in the air, like thunderclouds before rain. That night, sleep evaded Ma. The city sounds felt louder than usual. The distant honk of taxis, the bark of stray dogs, the hum of generators, all blending into a restless symphony that mirrored her thoughts. Somewhere in that noise, she wondered what kind of girl her father's secret daughter might be, and whether her arrival would bring healing or ruin. 2 days later, the Kiki stopped in front of their gate. From inside stepped a slim girl with skin the color of ripe cola, her eyes wide and sharp like polished glass. She carried a small black nylon bag that looked far too light for someone who had come to start a new life. Ma stood at the doorway beside her mother, studying her quietly. There was something about the girl's poise, the way she stood, too assured for 17, too calm for someone who had lost a mother. "Good afternoon, Ma," the girl said, her voice low but firm. "My name is Adiz." Her tone carried no hesitation, no sign of fear. It startled Ma. Mama Ifeoma reached out to embrace her, murmuring, "You are welcome, my child." Adiz allowed the hug, but didn't return it. She looked around the compound with quick eyes, as if measuring it, memorizing corners, calculating. The sky above them was pale gray, and a wind passed, carrying the faint scent of rain and exhaust fumes. Ma helped carry the girl's bag inside. The sitting room looked smaller now, more crowded with invisible emotions. Adiz's gaze swept over the framed photos on the wall, lingering briefly on one of Mr. Okafor in his office suit. "He looks just like me," she said softly, half to herself. Ma felt her chest tighten. Mama Ifioma smiled faintly, her eyes damp. "You both carry his spirit," she said, forcing warmth into her words. They showed Adiz her new room, small but tidy, the window facing the courtyard. She thanked them politely, sat on the bed, and smiled. But it wasn't the smile of a child. It was the kind of smile people wear when they already know too much about the world. That night, as rain began to fall lightly over the rooftops, Ma lay awake, staring at the ceiling fan's slow spin. The thought of her father's hidden life pressed against her chest like a weight she couldn't lift. Days stretched into weeks, and Adiz's presence began to color every corner of the house. She was courteous, yes, but there was a distance to her politeness, a curtain that no one could draw aside. She spoke sparingly, listened sharply, and carried herself with the kind of confidence that made neighbors whisper. Mama Ifioma tried to guide her gently, showing her how to help in the kitchen, how to join morning prayers, how to blend into the rhythm of their home. Adiz obeyed, but without surrender. She performed tasks perfectly yet without soul, like someone ticking boxes on a list she didn't write. Ma noticed it most in the evenings. While she and her mother sat watching the 9 o'clock news, Adiz would slip out quietly to the corridor, phone in hand, her face lit faintly by the blue glow of the screen. One evening, Ma followed quietly and caught sight of her whispering to someone on a call, her voice low, laced with soft laughter that made Ma's stomach twist. "You know I miss you," Adiz said, her tone far too grown for her age. When she noticed Ma standing there, she didn't flinch. She only smiled, a small, secret smile that said more than any explanation could. Ma said nothing, but something cold settled in her chest that night. The air in the house began to change. Mama Ifioma noticed it too, though she didn't speak of it. She just prayed louder each morning, as though trying to drown the quiet storm forming under her roof. The first week after Adiz's arrival in Enugu moved like a shadow creeping across a wall, slow, quiet, and unsettling. The family tried to adjust, to act as though nothing had changed, but change has a way of announcing itself even in silence. Ma felt it first, in the way the air inside their flat seemed thicker, like something invisible was watching. She would wake up in the middle of the night and hear faint humming from Adiz's room. Songs unfamiliar, words slipping between English and Igbo, low and haunting. During the day, Adiz's presence filled the house with both liveliness and discomfort. She was polite in front of guests, always quick to greet, but her politeness was mechanical, a mask that never cracked. She asked many questions about the city, about nightclubs, about music, about what men in Enugu liked in a girl. Sometimes she would watch Ma applying lip gloss before work and say, "You have a nice face, but you hide it too much." There was something disarming about her honesty, but also something off, like sweetness laced with pepper. Mama Ifioma, always eager to believe the best in people, said it was just her youthful curiosity. "City children these days are like kites," she told Ma one afternoon while peeling yam in the kitchen. "You can hold the string, but you cannot stop the wind." Ma nodded but said nothing. In her heart, she knew Adiz was not like other 17-year-olds. There was a look in her eyes, a depth that belonged to someone who had already danced too close to fire. By the third week, Adiz had begun to adapt to the pulse of Enugu life. She went with Ma to the market at Ogbit, where the air was always thick with voices, bargaining, and the smell of roasted plantain. Adiz walked through the crowd with an ease that surprised Ma. She smiled at strangers, laughed easily, and spoke as though she'd lived there all her life. The traders adored her instantly. One of the fruit sellers even gave her extra oranges, because of her pretty smile. Ma watched quietly, half proud and half uneasy. On the way home, Adiz chatted nonstop, her voice bright, full of stories from Nsukka, the friends she'd had, the men who'd admired her mother, the nights filled with music and smoke. When Ma tried to caution her, she shrugged, saying, "Life is too short to fear everything." It was the kind of remark that clung to Ma's mind long after they'd reached home. Later that evening, while Mama Ifioma was at prayer meeting, Adiz knocked on Ma's door and asked to borrow her perfume. "You're not going out, are you?" Ma asked. Adiz smiled, the corners of her mouth curling like mischief itself. No, she said. But when Ma woke up at midnight, she found the gate slightly open, a trail of wet footprints leading toward the street. Adiz returned at dawn, her hair slightly damp, the smell of cigarette smoke faintly clinging to her clothes. She smiled and whispered, "Don't tell Mama." Ma didn't. But her silence tasted bitter, like guilt mixed with fear. Something about the girl made it hard to stay angry, yet harder to stay at peace. Mama Ifioma, on the other hand, refused to see the storm forming beneath the calm. To her, Adiz was simply a girl learning how to fit into a family that wasn't hers by birth. She prayed for her constantly, calling her my late husband's second blessing. On Sunday mornings, she made sure Adiz dressed properly for church, reminding her to wear long skirts and avoid bright lipstick. Adiz obeyed at first, but soon began to push boundaries. One morning she appeared in a fitted gown, red as hibiscus, her hair in tight curls, her lips glossed like wet fruit. The congregation stared as she walked past, hips swaying gently, eyes unflinching. After service, Mama Ifioma scolded her, but Adiz only smiled and said, "I am not naked, Mama." The words, though not wrong, carried a quiet rebellion. It was the same tone Ma used to hear from classmates who loved to provoke teachers just to feel alive. That afternoon, Ma caught Mama sitting alone in the parlor, her Bible open but unread. "Do you think I'm losing her?" she asked quietly. Ma wanted to reassure her, but couldn't find the words. The truth sat heavy between them. Adiz was not a child to be lost or found. She was a storm pretending to be still water. The more they tried to contain her, the more she seemed to slip through their fingers. Yet, somehow, in her laughter, in her boldness, there was also something broken, a crack that flickered through her confidence like lightning behind a cloud. One evening, everything came to a head. The sky was bruised with rain, and thunder rolled faintly over the hills. Ma was in the kitchen cooking rice when she heard voices outside the gate, male voices, low and teasing. She peered through the curtain and saw Adiz standing close to a man leaning on a motorbike, his face half lit by the streetlight. He touched her arm lightly, whispering something that made her laugh. The sight made Ma's stomach twist in knots. Without thinking, she stormed out. The man sped away, and Adiz turned sharply, her expression neither guilty nor afraid, just bored. "Why are you watching me like a thief?" she said, her tone cutting. Ma could barely speak. "He's too old for you," she managed to say. Adiz smiled faintly, that same dangerous smile. "You think I don't know what I'm doing?" The rain began to fall in thin, cold drops, soaking Ma's wrapper. She didn't answer. When they went back inside, the silence between them was heavy enough to choke. Later that night, Ma found herself sitting by her window, staring into the rain. She could hear Adiz humming again, softly, carelessly, as if nothing had happened. The melody floated through the house like perfume and pain mixed together. For the first time, Ma whispered to herself, "Maybe she didn't come to us for help. Maybe she came to remind us of who Father really was." The thought frightened her, and yet, beneath that fear, a strange pity stirred, quiet but persistent, like a seed breaking soil in the dark. The city had a way of wearing secrets like perfume, sweet enough to draw attention, yet heavy enough to choke those who breathed it too deeply. Enugu's mornings were busy as ever, women selling puff-puff by the roadside, school children dragging their feet through puddles, taxis honking like impatient birds. To everyone else, life looked ordinary, but inside the Okafor flat, the ordinary had long left. Ma began to notice small changes in her brother Chaik too. He had grown distant, more restless, often staying out late after football practice. When he was home, he laughed too easily at Adiz's jokes, his gaze lingering on her longer than it should. At first, Ma thought she was imagining things. But one evening, while setting the dining table, she saw the two of them sitting too close on the sofa, whispering and laughing softly. It wasn't the kind of laughter siblings shared. It carried a nervous electricity that made Ma's skin crawl. She called Chaik sharply, and he stood up, pretending nothing was wrong. Adiz only smiled, a faint, knowing smile that said she was aware of every thought crossing Ma's mind. That night, Ma sat by the window, watching the orange glow of streetlights flicker over the wet road, and wondered if trouble had finally found a home in theirs. The air smelled of rain and diesel, and somewhere far away, music drifted from a bar, slow, melancholic highlife that made the night feel heavier. Mama Ifioma had gone to visit a church friend, leaving Ma alone with her thoughts. She wanted to confront Adiz, to demand the truth, but something about the girl's calmness always stole her words before they left her tongue. The next day, Ma decided to dig deeper. She visited one of her father's old colleagues, a retired lecturer who had once known him well. His name was Mr. Nwodo, a man whose wrinkles carried stories like maps. He welcomed her into his sitting room filled with old books and faint tobacco smell. When she mentioned Adi's mother, he sighed deeply, rubbing his temples. Your father was a good man, but he was also human, he said. He met that woman at a training seminar in Sukka years ago. She was beautiful, wild, and free. Everything your father wasn't. I warned him, but he said she made him feel young again. His words sank into Nma like stones. Did he love her? She asked. The old man gave a sad smile. He thought he did. But sometimes love is just loneliness wearing perfume. On her way home, Nma's thoughts tangled with the rhythm of the city. She remembered Adi's confidence, her sharp wit, her unflinching eyes. It all made sense now. The girl was her father's mirror, reflecting parts of him the family never saw. When Ma got home, Adiz was in the kitchen helping Mama Ifioma slice vegetables. She looked up and smiled politely, but her eyes told another story. You've been quiet lately, Ma said, forcing a calm tone. Are you settling in? Adiz shrugged. I'm fine. This place just feels small sometimes. It wasn't an insult, but it struck Ma like one. Small, that was how Adiz saw everything that tried to contain her. That night, as she lay in bed, Ma wondered if love could really fix someone who didn't want to be fixed, or if all they were doing was dressing a wound that refused to close. Weeks passed, and the family continued walking the thin line between peace and chaos. Adiz began attending a beauty school near New Haven, a small gesture meant to keep her busy. She liked it at first, returning home with stories about her classmates and teachers. But the change didn't last long. Soon she began coming home later than usual, blaming traffic or evening lessons that stretched past time. One Friday evening, Mama Ifioma sent Nma to fetch her. The streets of Enugu were already glowing with the warm light of bars and food stalls when she arrived at the training center, only to find it locked. The guard on duty told her the students had left hours ago. Panic gripped her chest. She walked around for nearly 30 minutes before she finally saw Adiz across the road, standing beside a black car, her laughter spilling out like broken glass. The man beside her was older, his hair speckled with gray, his wrist heavy with a gold watch. Nma froze, watching from the shadows as Adiz accepted a small envelope from him and leaned in briefly before walking away. She crossed the road quickly, grabbed her arm, and hissed, "Who is that man?" Adiz blinked in surprise, then smirked. "A friend," she said simply. "You're following me now?" Nma's hands shook. "You're 17, Adiz. What kind of friend gives envelopes at night?" Adiz's smile faded. "The kind that listens when no one else does." Her words hung between them like smoke, heavy and poisonous. The ride home was silent except for the hum of traffic. When they reached the gate, Adiz turned and said softly, "You think I'm dirty, but you don't know what it's like to be wanted for a moment instead of ignored forever." She walked inside, leaving Ma standing under the flickering streetlight, unsure whether to cry or scream. That night, the house felt like it was holding its breath. Mama Ifioma was asleep, unaware of what had unfolded, while Ma sat in her room replaying every detail. She thought of Adiz's mother, the dancer who'd raised her among strangers, the nights filled with strange men, the legacy of confusion left behind. Maybe Adiz was fighting ghosts she didn't even understand. Around midnight, Ma heard soft footsteps outside her door. Adiz's voice came quietly, uncertain for the first time. "Ma, can I talk to you?" Ma hesitated, then opened the door. Adiz stood there, wearing her nightshirt, eyes glistening under the bulb's weak light. "I didn't mean to make you angry," she said. "It's just, sometimes I don't know how to be the person everyone wants me to be." The words cut deeper than any defense she could have offered. Ma sighed, motioning her in. They sat on the edge of the bed, neither speaking for a while. The city outside hummed with the soft growl of distant generators, the night heavy and alive. "You don't have to be perfect," Ma said finally. "You just have to try not to destroy yourself." Adiz gave a weak laugh. "You sound like Mama." But there was no mockery in her tone, only weariness. As she left for her room, Ma watched her go, her small frame swallowed by shadows. For the first time, she saw not defiance, but loneliness, thick, quiet, and endless. The rain came without warning that Saturday afternoon, heavy and wild, drumming on the roof like 1,000 impatient fingers. The city dimmed under gray clouds, and the air smelled of wet dust and ripe mangoes. Inside the flat, the three women sat in different corners of the sitting room, each lost in her own silence. Mama Ifioma was mending a torn wrapper, her eyes half closed, humming an old church hymn under her breath. Ma pretended to be reading a magazine, though her eyes hadn't moved from the same page for 15 minutes. Adiz sat by the window, staring out at the road, her chin resting on her knees, her phone silent for once. The storm had trapped them together, and the weight of unspoken things filled the space like smoke. When the thunder cracked, Adiz flinched, her shoulders tightening as if she expected something worse than rain. Ma glanced up, noticing the tremor, wondering what memories the sound awakened in her. She wanted to reach out, to speak, but pride built walls faster than compassion could break them. The clock ticked loudly, marking time they were all pretending not to feel. Then, without looking away from the rain, Adiz said quietly, "You ever wonder what your father thought of me?" The question cut through the room like glass shattering. Mama Ifeoma's hand froze mid-stitch, and Ma's magazine slipped from her fingers. The only sound was the rain's steady pounding. "He thought of you as his child," Mama said finally, her voice calm but brittle. Adiz turned her head slowly, meeting her eyes. "That's easy to say when he was yours first." The words hung, raw and heavy. Mama Ifeoma looked away, blinking fast. "Blood is blood, Adiz. No one is second in God's sight." But even she didn't sound convinced. Ma stood, walked to the window, and whispered, "Maybe it doesn't matter what he thought. What matters is what we do now." Adiz smiled faintly, almost sadly. "You talk like someone who still believes people can change." The next day, calm returned, but only on the surface. Beneath it, resentment moved quietly like an underground stream. Adiz began spending more time outside, volunteering at the salon near Basala Road, where she sometimes helped braid customers' hair. She came home smelling of hair oil and strange perfume, her laughter bright but forced. Mama Ifeoma tried to bridge the gap by inviting her to family dinners, but Adiz's restlessness couldn't be hidden. One evening she came home late again, her eyes red, her face pale. "You've been crying," Ma said softly, but Adiz brushed past her. "I'm just tired." Later that night, Ma found her outside on the balcony, phone in hand, whispering angrily. She caught fragments of sentences. "You promised me. I can't keep doing this," before Adiz noticed her and hung up. For the first time, Ma saw fear in her face, not arrogance. The next morning, a rumor drifted into their compound. A married man had been caught with a young girl at a hotel nearby, and his wife had made a scene so wild it became the talk of the neighborhood. When Mama Ifeoma mentioned it, Adiz's spoon clattered against her plate. No one spoke, but the silence said everything. That night, after prayers, Ma found Mama sitting alone, eyes wet. "Maybe I was wrong to bring her here," she whispered. "Maybe some wounds only spread when you try to heal them." Ma knelt beside her, held her hand. "If you send her away now, you'll lose her forever." The words were meant to comfort, but even as she said them, Ma felt the weight of uncertainty pressing down on her chest. Somewhere outside, a generator coughed to life, filling the air with its dull metallic growl, as if the city itself refused to sleep. A week later, the storm they'd been avoiding broke. It was late evening, the air hot and restless after days without rain. Mama Ifeoma had gone to the vigil at church. Ma was ironing clothes in the corridor when she heard voices from Adiz's room. Two of them, male and low. She froze. Her first thought was that she was imagining it, but then came a faint laugh, followed by the scrape of a chair. Her heart slammed against her ribs. She walked quietly to the door and pushed it open. Inside, a young man stood by the window, shirt half-buttoned, eyes wide with shock. Adiz jumped up, panicked. "It's not what you think," she started, but the lie was already too late. Ma's voice came out low and trembling. "Get out!" The man grabbed his shoes and fled down the corridor. For a long moment, the two sisters just stared at each other, the air between them thick with shame and fury. Then Ma spoke, her voice breaking. "You bring disgrace into this house after everything?" Adiz's eyes blazed. "You think I wanted this life? You think I asked to grow up knowing men before I knew safety?" The words struck deep. Ma felt her anger melt into helplessness. "Then let us help you," she said softly. But Adiz laughed bitterly. "You can't help someone who doesn't know how to stay still." She ran out into the night barefoot, rain starting to fall in thin silver lines. Ma stood in the doorway, watching her disappear into the blur of lights, her breath shaking. By the time morning came, Adiz hadn't returned. Mama Ifeoma wept openly for the first time since the funeral, pacing the compound with a wrapper tied tightly around her chest. Ma called every friend she could think of, checked the salon, even went to the police station. Nothing. Hours crawled by. The rain had stopped, but the world still felt drenched. At dusk, just as the streetlights flickered on, A knock came at the gate, soft, hesitant. Ma ran to open it. Adiz stood there, soaked, eyes swollen from tears, clutching her phone like a talisman. She didn't speak. She just walked in, collapsed into Mama's arms, and began to sob, loud, raw, broken sobs that filled the night. Mama said nothing, only stroked her hair, whispering prayers that mixed with Adiz's cries. Later, when the house had quieted, Ma found a small torn photo on the floor by the door. Adiz and a man, smiling awkwardly, taken at what looked like a hotel balcony. The corner of the photo was burned, as though she'd tried to destroy it. Ma folded it quietly and slipped it into a drawer. The night hummed outside, and for the first time, Ma realized their home was no longer just shelter. It had become a battlefield between love and the ghosts of choices no one had fully understood. She turned off the lights, listening to the faint rhythm of Adiz breathing from the next room, and prayed that morning, when it came, would bring something softer than regret. Morning arrived quietly, like an apology. The storm of the previous night had washed the air clean, leaving the streets glistening beneath the soft blush of sunrise. Ma sat on the veranda with a mug of tea growing cold in her hands, her eyes distant. Inside, Adiz still slept, her breathing shallow, her body curled like a child's. Mama Ifioma had gone to morning mass, her rosary beads clinking faintly as she left. The compound was still, save for the soft hum of the neighbor's generator. Ma's mind was a whirlpool of exhaustion and thought. She wanted to be angry, but found only pity. She wanted to feel peace, but found only worry. She thought of the way Adiz had returned the night before, shaking, drenched, her face blotched with tears, and how Mama had held her as if fear alone could be driven out by love. Ma had watched them silently, realizing that forgiveness sometimes came before understanding. The city was stirring now, hawkers shouting early prices, children in uniforms trudging through puddles, kiki horns echoing like impatient birds. But inside her chest, time still moved like slow oil. She looked at the faint reflection of herself in the tea's surface, saw the dark rings under her eyes, and wondered if responsibility had aged her faster than the years. When Adiz finally emerged from her room, her face was puffy but calm. "I want to start over," she said simply, her voice hoarse. Ma nodded. She wanted to believe her. She really did. But she had learned that words could be as light as feathers. They floated easily but rarely carried weight until proven by the wind. True to her promise, Adiz began to change in small ways that mattered. She started helping more around the house, went back to the salon, and even joined Mama Ifioma for Sunday service without complaint. The women at church, who had whispered her name like a warning, now greeted her politely, their curiosity softened by time. Ma watched all this cautiously, like someone afraid to trust a fragile bridge. But slowly Adiz's laughter began to sound different, less sharp, more real. One afternoon, Ma found her sitting beneath the almond tree near the compound gate, braiding the hair of a little neighbor girl while humming softly. It was such an ordinary sight, yet it filled Ma's chest with a strange tenderness. When Adiz noticed her watching, she smiled shyly and said, "I'm thinking of learning how to make wigs properly. Maybe I can open my own place one day." The simplicity of that dream felt sacred. "You can," Ma replied, and for the first time in months, she believed it might be true. Even Mama Ifioma seemed lighter. She began singing more during chores, her laughter returning like a song rediscovered. But peace in Enugu was always temporary, like the pause between thunder and lightning. A week later, while sweeping the corridor, Ma found Adiz's phone vibrating under the cushion of the sofa. The screen flashed a name, Uncle Sam, and a message that froze her blood. "I miss your touch. Are you still scared?" Her hands trembled. She locked the screen, heart pounding. She didn't confront Adiz immediately. Instead, she spent the night turning the words over in her mind, trying to decide whether to protect her sister or protect what was left of their home. Days turned into weeks again, and Adiz carried on as if nothing had happened. But to Ma, every smile now looked slightly rehearsed. Suspicion, once planted, grows quickly in silence. One evening, as they were cooking together, Ma finally said, "Who is Uncle Sam?" Adiz froze, the ladle hovering above the pot. "Why are you checking my phone?" Her tone was cold, defensive. "Because I care," Ma shot back. "Because I'm tired of waiting for trouble to knock again." Adiz stared at her for a long moment, then sighed. "He was the man from before," she whispered. "The one that got me into that mess." She dropped the ladle and sat on the kitchen floor, her shoulders shaking. "He said he'd help me get modeling work. I was stupid. I thought he saw something good in me. The confession broke something in Ma. She knelt beside her and held her tight. Adiz wept openly now, her words tumbling out in fragments. How she'd been manipulated. How the man had threatened to expose her when she tried to leave. How fear had tied her tongue. When Mama Ifioma returned and found them there, she didn't ask questions. She simply knelt beside them and began to pray, her voice trembling but firm. For the first time, Adiz didn't resist. The next morning, she blocked the man's number, deleted his messages, and handed the phone to Ma. "I'm done," she said quietly. And for once, her voice didn't waver. That night, when they sat on the veranda listening to the crickets, Adiz leaned her head on Ma's shoulder and said, "Do you think people like me can ever really start again?" Ma smiled faintly. "Every sunrise is proof that God believes we can." The wind stirred softly through the compound, carrying away the last traces of the storm that had followed them for months. The following weeks brought a peace so gentle it almost frightened them. Adiz threw herself into her new passion, waking early to train at the salon, returning home tired but smiling. Ma got a promotion at her office downtown, and Mama Ifioma began planning a small Thanksgiving dinner. The rhythm of normal life returned, cautious but real. One afternoon, as they sat peeling oranges on the balcony, Adiz said, "Sometimes I dream of Dad. I can't see his face clearly, but I hear his voice. He keeps saying sorry." Ma looked at her, unsure what to say. "Maybe that's his way of giving you peace," she offered. Adiz smiled, eyes glistening. "Maybe. Or maybe it's mine." They both laughed softly. The air smelled of fruit and sunlight, and for once, there was no ache in the silence between them. But life, like the Enugu skyline, always holds one last curve before nightfall. That evening, a letter arrived, an envelope bearing the crest of a law firm in Nsukka. It was from their late father's solicitor. Inside was a small property deed and a short note. "To Adiz, the daughter I never had time to know. Forgive me." Tears filled her eyes as she handed it to Ma. "He did remember me," she whispered. "All this time he did." Ma hugged her tightly, the two sisters holding each other against the fading light. Below them, the city buzzed, alive and indifferent. Above them, the sky deepened into the color of promise. It was the first time in a long while that home didn't feel like a place of pain. It felt like a beginning. Evening settled over Enugu with the quiet grace of a prayer that had finally been heard. The sun melted behind the hills, staining the clouds with amber light, and the air was warm but forgiving. Ma stood by the window, watching the neighborhood breathe. Children chasing kites on the street, women gossiping as they fetched water, the faint scent of roasted corn drifting in from the roadside. The house behind her was alive with a softness she hadn't felt in years. The shadows that had once clung to their corners seemed to have retreated at last. From the kitchen came the gentle sound of Mama Ifioma humming an old song from her youth, and from the veranda came Adiz's laughter, easy, genuine, bright as morning sunlight. The contrast from months ago felt like a miracle stitched together by patience. Ma turned and saw her sister helping Mama slice vegetables for dinner, moving with a grace that no longer tried to hide behind boldness. She looked older now, not by age but by experience, calmer, more deliberate, as though life had finally given her permission to rest. "Ma," she called out, "come and taste this stew. Tell Mama if it needs more salt." Ma joined them, scooped a bit with the spoon, and smiled. "It's perfect." Mama chuckled, wiping her hands on her apron. "For the first time, my kitchen smells of peace." The three of them laughed softly, the sound melting into the hum of the city. Outside, thunder grumbled far away, but no one flinched this time. Rain, when it came now, only meant renewal. In the weeks that followed, Adiz began visiting the small property in Nsukka that their father had left her. It wasn't much, a modest house on a quiet street, with cracked paint and mango trees bending lazily over the fence. But to her, it was more than walls and space. It was proof that she had been remembered, proof that her existence had never been entirely erased. On her first visit, she stood before the house for a long while, her eyes shining. "He built this for me," she whispered. Ma nodded. Maybe not with his hands, but with his regret. They spent the weekend cleaning it, sweeping cobwebs, scrubbing floors, opening the windows to let sunlight spill in. The neighbors came by, curious at first, but soon friendly, offering palm wine and conversation. Adiz sat under one of the mango trees that evening, barefoot, staring at the sky. "It's strange," she said quietly. "I used to think everything my father gave me was pain. Now I think maybe pain was just his way of leaving something behind." Ma didn't answer. She sat beside her, feeling the breeze carry the scent of ripening fruit. When they returned to Enugu, Adiz looked lighter, as though she'd dropped a weight she didn't know she'd been carrying. Mama Ifeoma hugged her at the gate, whispering a prayer of thanks. That night, the three of them ate roasted yam and palm oil, laughing over nothing in particular. For the first time, their laughter sounded like music that didn't need words. As the days slipped into months, life settled into a rhythm gentle enough to believe in. Adiz's wig-making business grew faster than anyone expected. Soon she was supplying to salons across the city. Her name became known, whispered proudly among hairdressers who admired her skill. Ma often watched her work, fingers moving quickly, eyes focused, her once reckless energy now channeled into creation. Mama Ifeoma would sit by, counting the finished pieces with motherly pride. "See how God writes straight with crooked lines," she would say, smiling. Sometimes, Ma would find Adiz staring at their father's framed photo in the sitting room. "Do you forgive him now?" she asked one evening. Adiz paused. "I think I do. But more than that, I forgive myself." Her voice was soft, steady. "For hating the parts of me that looked like him." Ma placed a hand on her shoulder. "That's how healing starts." Later that night, as rain began to fall again, gentle, rhythmic, patient, Adiz stood by the window and whispered something Ma couldn't quite hear. It sounded like gratitude, shaped into a sigh. The city outside glowed faintly under the downpour, lights bending and trembling through the rain. Enugu had never looked so beautiful. The story of the Okafor women did not end with fireworks or noise. It ended the way real healing often does, quietly, without witnesses. One Sunday morning, as church bells echoed across the hills, they walked together down the narrow street leading to Mass. Adiz wore a plain white dress, her hair braided neatly, her face free of makeup. She looked radiant, not because she was trying, but because peace had finally made a home behind her eyes. Mama Ifeoma walked between her daughters, their hands clasped together, their steps unhurried. The neighbors greeted them with smiles, and even those who once whispered now nodded in respect. When they reached the church, Adiz paused at the entrance, her gaze drifting toward the altar. "Thank you," she whispered, not to anyone in particular, but to everything that had broken and then made her whole. Ma watched her and felt something deep shift inside. Not pride, not relief, but a quiet understanding that family was never about perfection. It was about staying, even when the walls shook. When the service ended, they walked home under the hot afternoon sun, the world bright and full. A gentle wind brushed their faces, carrying the scent of dust and blooming flowers. Somewhere in the distance, a radio played an old highlife tune, soft and familiar. And for the first time since their father's death, Ma realized she was no longer afraid of the future. It no longer felt like something waiting to hurt them. It felt like something waiting to begin. "My people, life will always test the weight of our hearts. Sometimes, the ones who come into our lives do not come to destroy us, but to reveal the hidden cracks we need to mend. Forgive where you can, guide where you must, and love even when it hurts to do so. You never know whose life you might be saving simply by staying patient. Remember, broken people don't always need punishment. Sometimes they just need a place where love can breathe again." Heavenly Father, we thank you for the gift of family, for mercy that rewrites stories, and for peace that returns after the storm. Where there is pain, Lord, plant healing. Where there is shame, raise dignity again. Where hearts are heavy, pour your calm like morning light. Teach us to love beyond judgment, to see beauty even in broken beginnings, and to forgive like you forgive us daily. Bless every home listening tonight. May peace sit at their tables, may laughter visit their walls, and may grace never be a stranger in their doors. Hope you enjoyed this interesting story. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Turn on post notifications. See you on our next story.